Welcome to the Great Reset with Goodwill Hinton. Tonight, my guest is Leroy Barber. Leroy Barber, a longtime friend of mine. Leroy has dedicated 30 years living and working towards what Dr. King called the beloved community. Leroy is originally from Philadelphia. In 1989, he and his wife Donna started Restoration Ministries to serve homeless families and children living on the streets. In 97, Leroy came to Atlanta and joined FCS Urban Ministries in Atlanta, serving as executive director of Atlanta Youth Academies, working with low-income families in the inner city. Leroy also helped found Door Atlanta Community Life Church, South Atlanta Marketplace, and Community Grounds Coffee Shop in Atlanta, as well as Green My Hood and the Voices Project. Leroy is currently director of innovation for an engaged church serving the greater Northwest area of the United Methodist Church, and is co-founder of the Voices Project and adjunct professor at Kilns College and Multnomah University. Leroy is also a Cowboys fan and a Portland Timbers fan, and I will not hold that against him. How are you, Leroy?
You let me on the show, man. You let me on the show, so I feel honored.
Yeah, man. You know, I knew we were going to go there, so we'll do a little banter. Leroy, gives me some grief about Atlanta United, so we may drop that in here or there.
That's right.
So how is, I'm not sure how you ask somebody how things are going in a global pandemic, but tell me how life is. What's been going on over the past couple months for you?
Oh man, well, I think me, like everybody else, is trying to figure out. I mean, obviously, everybody's uses the line "stay safe," right? And Are you being safe and those kinds of things. And I think that's on the forefront of my mind, like a lot of other people. But I think also all of us are appreciative of our healthcare workers and all that they're doing and putting their lives and bodies on the line. So I'm feeling grateful for that, and I think I'm lamenting, man. A lot of people have lost a lot of family, and I have friends who've lost parents, and so trying to be present in that space, is tough. So it's kind of up and down, right? I'm an extrovert. I'm an ENFP. I'm an Enneagram 8, right? I'm off the scales extrovert. I'm not even nowhere close to the middle of that, right? And so,
yeah, me too.
So at the same time, right? I'm just like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta do something, right? But I've ridden more bike. I've ridden my bike more and walked more than I have in the whole last 7 years that I've lived here. So.
Yeah, that's funny how that. So I've had the experience of kind of doing more walking around the neighborhood than I ever had. And I'm finding kind of there's some good things like kind of meeting neighbors in ways that didn't happen before. Are you having that happen?
Yeah, I mean, and Atlanta, I lived in Atlanta for 17 years. And so, neighbor is something that if you get out there and walk and kind of, folks kind of fall into it pretty quickly there, man. It's just, it's kind of in the DNA a little bit, even if I know Atlanta's changed a ton, but it still seems like it's there. So I don't know if that's been your experience. Sounds like it has been. But.
Yeah, it's been, and I've said this once before on the show, there's some kind of hearkening back to how things were when I was a kid, meaning people aren't in front of a screen and go inside the house as soon as they get home from work, but people are kind of getting out, sitting out on their porch, a little friendlier, more willing to say hello. Like you don't walk past people in the street now and not wave or say hello.
Right. And that's kind of fun, man. Getting back to neighbor or, reestablishing neighbor is a fun possibility. Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Since we're on this topic, I said this like the first week that this happened. I said, this has got to keep happening. How do we keep doing this? And so I've given a lot of thought. Okay, well, what does that look like? And it's not just me deciding to keep walking. It's got to be more intentional, and it's got to be talking to others. What do you think? Like, how do you think people go about, there's every neighborhood's different. Some neighborhoods kind of have that inherent sense of
Right.
community. People know each other. Some don't. So for those that don't, where do you begin?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Will, I think you like what you're doing is where you begin, right? You don't, there's no, um, an intention of just kind of being out there, making some time to be present, right? And letting relationships build naturally, right?
Hmm.
And I've always been one to, it's been a part of my work and a part of a lot of ministry and all those kind of things that I've done to be intentional as a neighbor. But I think if that's not your, I guess I'm a professional neighbor of some sort. But I guess, but just getting out there and just setting aside the time, and now we have the
Hmm.
time, right? People have
That's
more
right.
time than they know what to do with, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
so things are springing up.
Yeah. So are there some kind of things that new things you've started doing during this time that you'd never imagined, beyond riding your bike? Like, are there
Mhm.
some new kind of habits you've started?
You know what's interesting? I'm not a TV watcher, right?
Mm.
I watch two things on TV, literally, right? Like
Cowboys and what?
the sports and the news. That's it. Like that is the bulk of my TV watching, right?
Yeah.
And so when sports go, it's like, oh, 80% of the reason I
Hmm.
even watch TV is gone, right? And
Yep.
then and the news is just depressing, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I only can take so much of that now. So I think I don't know. I'm discovering. Obviously, kids are home right now, and what that means, and the conversations you're having, and the view. I mean, if you're running as a parent, I mean, honestly, I
Mm.
have 6 kids, right? Like, like honestly, running as a parent, like you can miss some nuances in your children, right?
For sure.
If everybody is speaking honestly, like you're working, you're doing this, you're doing that, there's a little nuance that you might miss in your kids, right? And I
Hmm.
think I think being home, I'm like, oh yeah, like I need to probably work on that with my son, right? So that's been the thing I've been paying attention to the most, honestly.
I
Like what
like
are you
that.
missing as a parent? You know?
I like that because one of the common tropes that you see these days, and let's be real. I mean, parents, it is not easy to juggle a job if you're in a position of working from home and having to parent. So that's difficult. Yet there
Yeah,
does seem to be a little bit of a trope like, oh, this is hell with my kids, and I'm like,
right.
really?
Yeah.
Like, I know it's hard, but there's also opportunities there, right?
Well, and like right, like so if you yeah, I mean, I think it's just that you're at work all day, they're at school all day, y'all come together in the evenings, it's maybe good, but it's a rhythm, right?
Yep.
Now the rhythm is no, y'all gotta be in the same room in the same place, and the little nuances of who you are that you didn't have time to discover about your kid or your kid about you is all of a sudden coming out. It's not all the kids driving you crazy, right? Like it's some
It goes
nuances.
both ways.
Yeah, right. So yeah,
Mm.
that's been an interesting thing just to kind of like not always conversation either, like just looking and learning and listening to
Hmm.
the 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 the, the details of who they are as people is has
Yeah.
been interesting.
So we're in this kind of, as I've been thinking about it with the show, what I'm thinking of is a cultural pause.
Mhm.
And, everybody wants to go back to normal. And there's a sense of, yeah, we all want to go back to normal. And so I started thinking as I developed this idea of the show is, maybe there's some normals in our culture that aren't so good. Maybe we don't want to go back to those.
Right.
And when I emailed you about kind of what we wanted to talk about, you talked about, yeah, one of those is injustice.
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of, talk me through what that looks like. What are some of those old normals that
Mm,
it's
mm,
time
mm, mm.
to move past?
So yeah, that's cool. Like you asked me this, and I was like, oh man, that's a giant question. Um, I'll say at the beginning, I want to get somewhere with
Mhm.
this whole thing. Um, uh, and I'm a believer of to get somewhere, right? We've got to examine, right?
Yeah.
And the examination isn't like you trying to be a negative person, and it's not you trying to be a down or bring things down. It's like, no, no, no. My goal is to get somewhere. And I think
Mhm.
and thinking about what COVID-19 has brought into our lives, right? One of the big things that I think is happening is we now need to be a community. Like we have to get through this. We've got to be a community,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And the like the more you are an individual right now, right, the
Mhm.
less helpful you are to us getting through it, right?
Yes.
And so we are Americans, man. We've been taught rugged individualism, right?
Mhm.
Some communities more than others, right? But still, like, and to now for us to need to be communal in every sense of the word, I think it's hard for us.
It
I think
is. People
like
don't know how to think about that because they're used to
right.
just thinking about themselves and their surrounding family, whatever.
I mean, one of the worst things that you can imagine, right, is if for you to have right a virus that could hurt someone, but it's the signs of it are not showing in you,
Yeah.
right? That dude, that if that isn't a commentary on our history and who we are, I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
what is, right? So my in my mind, I hope this makes sense as we're talking. In my mind, I'm going. So if you can wrap your mind around, I could I could have the virus and be asymptomatic, right? And spread it, right? Or if you can wrap your head around, I like treat yourself as though you have it,
Yep.
right? Put a mask on when you go out, put gloves on, stay socially distant, right? Do these things even though you feel fine,
Mhm.
right? Now, if you can understand that logic, right, which many people do, right, then let's flip that logic to
Mhm.
other things in our society, in our life, right?
Yep.
So if you have a home and have had health care and have had all of these things, right? All right, take the blame out of it. I don't let's not even get to that conversation. All I want you to do, right, is to behave right, and think like you didn't have those things, and you had to step into somebody else's shoes, right? Like if you can wrap your head around that a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Think how much that improves our society and starts to turn this negative wave. Because if I start to think, oh, I'm asymptomatic, I have a house. I'm asymptomatic. Always had health care. I'm asymptomatic. I can work from home. I'm asymptomatic, right? My check
Mhm.
goes into my bank account and my mortgage gets paid. That's what
Yep.
happened for me 2 weeks ago, right? Or whenever the first of the month is. I didn't it's automatic withdrawal for me. My check goes in the bank. But if I'm asymptomatic, what is my responsibility to somebody who is not,
That's right.
right? And who either has it or I can make it worse by not thinking about them in this time. I don't know if that makes sense, man.
Absolutely. It's around, I mean, I think part of what you're getting at, and this would be kind of my follow-up question, it's really developing a sense of empathy and kind of seeing others and tried to put ourselves in their shoes where possible. So how do we develop empathy and being able to kind of see, that seeing ourselves as asymptomatic, but recognizing how what we do impacts others and recognizing others are in a different place.
Right. And that's where like the whole idea of justice and you know um you know that's why people protest all these kinds of things, right? Like literally if those things were to be seen as, oh, we're trying to get attention of people who are asymptomatic, right?
Yep.
So that you can think differently about the person who isn't, right?
Mhm.
Like so like I mean, dude, think about it. Two people, right? Say both were diagnosed with coronavirus, right?
Mhm.
One had a house, one didn't. One has had healthcare all their life, the other didn't, right? One
Right.
has a job that they can work from home, and the other person has to keep going to work, right? Like literally, in their bodies will play out history,
Oh yeah.
right? Like no, like nothing unequal. Like there's no, like this disease is non-discriminating. It hit them
That's,
both, but the difference is their history. That's
yep.
it, right? That's what we're dealing with, right? And
Mhm.
that's the man. That's the moment we're living in. Because if
Yeah,
you feel good, you're not thinking about it.
that's right. So there seems to be, I don't know why there's, for some people it's difficult to see some of those injustices, lack
Mhm.
of healthcare, lack of housing. um, how do we when I remember reading a quote years ago around the idea of reconciliation,
Mhm.
and the idea being there's no reconciliation until you speak truth about the situation.
Mhm.
And so it makes me think, well, how do you speak the truth and help people kind of uncover the reality of these injustices in a way that they can understand and see? And I'm saying, I mean, it's not easy. I don't,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
if it was, I think we'd be making it happen.
Right. And and I think that's the. I mean, that's part of this idea of I don't know, awareness, right? When you are made aware of something, right, is many times I think people take it as this is an indictment on them,
Mm,
right? Right. And if you don't take it as an indictment and take it as what should I be what should I be learning or listening to or trying to understand in this, right? Not an indictment on you. Like I like guilt. I like guilt. That 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 means nothing to me. I don't like guilty is just useless. It's useless for the person and it's useless for like the party trying to get justice and the party who could give it. Right?
mhm.
Guilt doesn't help either one of them.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a matter of how we learn and who we learn from, and are we open, again, I think swinging back to this idea of broad community, because I
Mhm.
believe that the capacities, are within us to think about our neighbor.
Yep.
I think that capacity is there.
Oh yeah.
um, and if we can get people to tap into that, or come close enough where they see it themselves, then it changes perspective, right?
Yeah.
i'm sure I'm sure there are healthcare workers right now, right, who may have thought one way going into this, whose worldviews have been completely shifted by this
Mhm.
pandemic,
That's right.
right? And if there's a space for shifting, it's now. What if my thing is, what if what if this is a moment that we can come out of here different for the better.
Yep.
Like we can we can move towards a beautiful, diverse expression of creation.
I love that.
Right? Like I'm not trying to make black people white or white people black, or Asian people Latino. Like no, like you are who you are. Like, but we can be a beautiful expression
Yep.
of humanity, of the diversity of creation, and get along.
You talk about the creation. I'm thinking, man, people love the when we talk about creation, seeing the diversity of animals, and I'm like, well, let's do the same thing with us, right?
Yes. Yeah, I it's funny you say that, right? Because, dude, it's funny, right, that any other thing we want diversity for most things, right? Like if you go into a rose garden, you don't go, why are these stupid roses pink and these red and these yellow? You're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful, right? Like you want different things, you want different foods, you get tired of the same food. Everything except people. We don't want people. Right?
Yep.
It's crazy. So I don't know.
So I think so in some areas, I'm going to go off on something else that makes me think of this, and this is going to get into a little banter here because I'm going to, we talked a little bit Atlanta United, and I still hold that Atlanta United needs to be your team, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to talk to you why, and I want to. Well, and I'm going somewhere, and this is exactly to our point. I'm part of a supporters group called Footy Mob. Okay. And you can tell where the name comes from. It is all about Atlanta culture, celebrating Atlanta culture. It's not a perfect group, but it has been a place where I've been able to come in, and the way I describe Footy Mob is that it represents the best of what the new Atlanta is becoming. And I'll explain what and I say becoming, meaning we're not there yet. This isn't perfection, but it's when I compare the Atlanta that I grew up in and where I am now, and I look at being a part of this organization, Footy Mob, which is, I don't know, there's over 1,000 members, and most of the leadership are women and people of color. And not just leadership, but I'm talking like the public voices. So, like if in the stands, you guys got this with Portland Timbers. It's kind of lame, but you guys try it. You get somebody leading the cheers at one end. Okay.
Right.
Well, guess what? Our capo for Footy Mob is my friend Reggie, who went to Morehouse and is regularly on broadcast for Atlanta United. He's on NBC for soccer stuff. He is our representative. And if you had told me that situation would be where there's a substantial white membership in Footy Mob, and the people in that group, they're like, this is awesome. Reggie represents us. So to me, we're not there, but to me, it represents some of the diversity that you're talking about. And I just think of the joy we have in that group.
Yeah. So it sounds like y'all trying to start a Timbers army. It's just kind of, but
I'm showing you how it's done. Come on.
Just saying, it's cool that y'all trying that out. But yeah, I think to answer that though, right? Again, going back to, I think people want that, right? I think diversity, if you just take diversity and multi-ethnicity and all those kinds of things, that they are like when you can even get a little glimpse of it in a healthy way, like it's nothing but life-giving, right?
Yeah.
I think how we get there is to think through the lens of equity, right? And how does that play out, right? So, and I'm sure, I'm going to be on public saying this, but I've heard good things about the footy mob. All right.
I've heard good things about Portland Timber, so we don't
All
have
right,
to. It
all
doesn't
right,
have
all
to be
right,
all
all
that.
right, all right, all right. So I think there's good things going on around it, and I think with that hope and that desire, and I would imagine that somebody's thinking through equity, even in some small ways, right? I don't know, around tickets or around who gets to the games or percentages of vendors, or whatever, right? Like what kind of business is happening, who's getting the contracts, blah, blah. Like all those kinds of things are questions around equity that bring that space to life, right? And I think to get to the next stage of this, or deeper stage, not next, I think deeper, right?
Yeah.
Is to let equity be our guiding principle, right? And I think that is a part of community that will that could bring some substantial change, right? Because being in the same place doesn't necessarily bring equity, right? Like
Oh
you
yeah.
got to be intentional about it, and
Yep.
it sounds like somebody somewhere is being intentional about that, right? Or at least I would hope, right? So, um,
Yeah, it has to be a thoughtful thing, and because look, we're all shaped by the predominant culture that we've all grown up in,
mhm,
which
mhm, mhm.
it has not necessarily been geared towards diversity. So it has to be intentional. So you don't kind of and once again, it's not about okay, who's guilty, but it's a no. You have to constantly remind yourself, and I think it's also kind of I think to your point about getting those little taste of kind of that the beautiful vision of diversity and what it looks like when we when it does happen is okay, don't slide back into just the default.
Yeah. Well, and I, if diversity is kind of people in like, different groups of people together, right? To get to community, you've got to go through equity, right?
Absolutely.
Like if you take diversity and put it through equity, on the other side of that is community, right?
Hmm.
And out of community, like I think we can do a whole lot of good in the world. So
Yeah. But you can't, I think to your point though, you can't just like slip past injustice and kind of pretend to
no,
like not do the hard work and just say, now we're going to skip over to this diversity community thing. That
right.
that doesn't happen, does it?
No, no, no. I mean, and you know this, right? Like when I say equity, and that's a broad deal of around confrontation of injustice, right? Speaking truth to folks, right? And we take lessons from Dr. King that says, hey, do that in a nonviolent way in which the person in which you have a beef with or is your quote unquote enemy, there's always an invitation to join, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean turning our backs on injustice, right? It means as we work through that there's always invitation for us to join in this space, right? And so, nonviolent isn't just about not putting a gun on somebody or
Hmm.
smacking somebody. It's about a consistent invitation um, to be in community.
Yep. I it's not hard for us to think of kind of examples of injustice in kind of the old normal.
Mhm.
What are maybe some kind of more subtle things that the average person may not think about when they think of justice or kind of old normals that it would be great to get to
Hmm,
not go back to?
that's good. I can think of one. I can think of a couple, like right with current situation in COVID, right?
Hmm.
So we have, and rightfully so, right? We honor our doctors and nurses, right?
Hmm.
They're on commercials. We're saluting them. We're doing drop like everything, right? But a underlying tone, right, is you know somebody is cleaning those rooms in that hospital, right?
Yep.
Right? Somebody is going in and collecting all of that dirty stuff, right? Every
Yep.
day, 8 hours a day, right? Somebody is taking that trash out, right? Like there's all of these other pieces. If you're locked in your house and you order lunch, somebody had to go to work that morning and goes to work every single day, right? Because they need to feed their families.
Mm-hmm.
And them going to work is actually allowing you, right, to stay home.
Exactly.
So in those scenarios, there's an undertone of where our injustice sits in our society, right? Because many of those folks are working class, poor,
Mm-hmm.
many people of color, right?
Yep.
High percentages of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where our questions lie in this day, in this time, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
think about who's doing that, like what they're doing. Think, and the numbers, right, are playing out, where we are seeing, high the percentages of the death rate out of this, right, is significantly higher in the Black community and the
Yeah.
Latino community. Significantly. It's not even. I mean, the White House has, like, they've got to talk about this, right? Because it's that the injustice is that vast. And so, and again, if you take that information and go, oh, that A, B, C, D, that's because of it. No. Let's work this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's confront this injustice, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I hope people can get to, because the injustices are clear and have become even more clear as we're talking about this pandemic. So how do we deal with it becomes my question.
Yeah.
I don't. Do you think it's an argument still? Do you think there's still an argument against it?
No, I think so. You're right that it's clear, but I think so. When I think about kind of, the minimum wage workers in the hospital cleaning up, or let's take this broadly and go beyond just COVID-19 and say the garbage men that come and carry our trash away, the people that are doing all of our lawns while we're at work, I guess I would say the people that are invisible in our society.
Mm-hmm.
And there's and this isn't the case for everybody. I think about this so I still get out and work in my yard. I don't do it because I like it. I think it's because I'm just cheap. But there's something I have said for a number of years, there's something really valuable about doing manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I always think about whenever I do it, I'm like, man, imagining being in a position to have to do that day in, day out, that is your life.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it brings a little bit of awareness of, okay, these people aren't invisible. So I think that's part of it. So you're right, is that the facts are kind of there, but I wonder how much we kind of look around ourselves and see these people that they're often invisible to us because they're just part of the background, which is kind of sad. That's a sad commentary, I think.
And that's part of the confrontation of it, right? Is to shine lights on these things. Like there are people who go out once a week, go shopping, right? And you go into the supermarket and somebody's spraying down the carts that you're gonna use. That person is probably not making a livable wage.
That's right.
Right? But they are keeping it safe for you to go in and shop. Right? Yep. It's just it's hard to argue that in this moment, isn't it? Like I know
so stark.
But I think I'm a believer in public discourse, right? I don't need to put down what you believe. Here is why I believe this thing that I do, and if you want to learn from that, cool. And I can learn from listening to your position. I don't have to agree with it, right? And I think that hopefully we're in a time where that can happen, because the virus itself is non-discriminating,
That's
right?
right.
The results off of it are where our discrimination is coming out, right?
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that leaves open a space to talk a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's a lot. I want to go back to what you talked about earlier, this kind of rugged individualism.
Mhm.
And uh, and I don't know if this is gonna one of the first things I thought at the first few weeks, I'm like, man, that idea of this hyper individualism, it's got to be dead now, because it's like it doesn't work in this scenario. And I think we need to start thinking more broadly. What have we been missing out on by our insistence on having my way and everything got to be about me, without kind of regard for, well, how does what I do impact the people around me, not just my
Right,
immediate neighbors, but in my city, in my state, and more broadly, right?
right. So if what I would love, like, what, like the tenets of rugged individualism, right? Like, center ourselves, right?
Hmm.
And um although I think it stops short of self-harm, right?
Yeah.
It can lead to that,
Hmm.
but I think it stops short of that in the fact of, oh, like, if you are being harmed, then you have a right then, right, to look out for yourself, right?
Yep.
But before we get to harm, right, there's this whole other space we occupy, right?
Hmm.
And that is that space, I think, is where we build up all of this damage in society, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, we just got to have our own, right? There used to
Well,
be an there's an old spiritual. Um, my mama may have, my papa may have, right? But God bless the child that has his home, right? Is this old spiritual, and I know where that spiritual comes from. I know, I get the background of it, and what it means foundationally about, like, people needing agency of their own, right?
hmm,
But there's part of that, right, that is picked up in this society in America of, like, yep, I'm gonna drive my own thing. I'm a have my own house. I'm gonna, like, we might both be going the same place in the morning, but I'm driving my own car. I don't care if we got to sit in traffic for 3 hours, right?
yep.
Right. And so, I mean, Atlanta knows that very well, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
like majority of the people are driving their own car to
That's
our
right.
demise,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
To our demise. The environment is so bad, and that kind of thought process isn't working in the pandemic.
No, not at all.
It can't.
I mean,
It can't work.
think about, so, I'm kind of going back to some of these invisible people in our society, the people that work at the grocery store or that are waiting tables. And I think about just this attitude we have, and you see this at places. People go in, and if their meal isn't just perfect, man, they are going to lay into this person who, like, man, they're not even getting paid minimum wage because they're getting tips. And
Right.
I'm thinking,
Right. Right.
something's got to change. That can't
Right.
continue.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, and again, I think it's a travesty, right? I think we're in a horrible situation dealing with this virus. But the fact that many people can have no symptoms
Mm,
and literally kill someone
yeah.
is, right, is it's got to be eye opening. I hope, I'm like, hope, we know it's not everybody, but that facts remain, right? Like, somebody, I read a story. Somebody went to a birthday party of all, no one had symptoms. The
Mm,
person at the
yep.
party jokes about, oh, I could have had coronavirus. I could be infecting you all. And 3 days later, 5 people from that party have coronavirus because that person had it and was asymptomatic.
Man.
Right? That
Yeah.
changes. That
Well,
changes
and
life.
there's a part of me that, I sometimes we like these kind of watching a car wreck too much, but there's something to be said. Like, I think I'd kind of like to hear some voices of people who've gone through this, and I just kind of say, look, I had no idea. I mean, I think sometimes some of what's going on, it almost feels a little bit like things do in war, that it's over there and we don't really see the reality of it. And I'm not saying we want to see everything going on in hospitals, but unless it's like really hit close to us, it's hard to really feel the reality of what's happening now, isn't it?
Right, right, right. People
So,
don't believe they have it, right?
yeah.
Like you sitting and looking at somebody without a face mask, without gloves. Well, and it's like, you don't believe you have it, and you literally could be killing somebody.
Yeah.
That, like,
So,
man.
I know. So real quick, I know we have some people watching. If anybody has any questions for Leroy, feel free to jump in. I'll be watching for comments here, Leroy. I kind of like the term, not just community, but solidarity. I like that idea. And I get the feeling, and I can't express it very well, but get the feeling that perhaps our broader society could learn some things about solidarity from the Black community in America. Do you think that's true? And what does that look like?
Oh, I absolutely think that's true. Because there is a community that historically has had to count on each other in any, right? Literally, any progress that has happened for the Black community in this country has happened in community. Like, no way to do it without community. No way to get other folks involved, to organize other people, to rally other people, right? Like to move anything forward, from ending slavery, to learning how to vote, to housing, to jobs, to, like, just go down a list of things that people see as rights to have as Americans. Go down the entire list. Any of those things that the Black community in this country has, they have had to form as a community to make it happen. That gives them just a unique understanding of what organizing means, of what community means, of what sacrificing for other people means, right? No, I'll go this far. No Black person in this country, none, I don't believe anybody has, but no Black person is standing on their own. Nobody. Somebody did something significant for you to do something you're doing, right? From Supreme Court justice, right, to high academic, like a Cornell West, right, or somebody like that, or artist, anyone, right? There's just you're standing on somebody's shoulders. It was built for you, and in many cases, somebody died for you.
Yeah.
In many cases, somebody died for it. So,
and there's no not saying that or not recognizing that.
Yeah, all that to say that, like, that's just the course of our history and who we are as people. It's kind of built in because it had to be. And so why not tap into a community where that's kind of built into the DNA to lead through some of this stuff, right?
Yep.
And I'll go as far, like, that's unique for an African American community, but it's many communities that struggle, right? It's the Native community, it's Latino community, it's deep poor white communities, right? Like, though people have to, if you are in a place where you had to count on somebody else, then you understand that at a deeper level.
Yeah.
And so those folks, those are folks we should be counting on in times like this.
So on that, so when we think about, we've talked about kind of some of the ideas of injustice and these old normals. What are some new normals? Like, what are some specific things you'd love to see coming out of this? Like beyond just kind of a broader sense of solidarity, but
Mhm.
give me some specifics.
Mhm, mhm. So I think one of the specifics that is food itself,
Mm,
right? I'd like to see us have a vibrant way of the distribution of food um, to everyone that's needed. Let's get that figured out,
mm.
right? Because I think I think we're gonna move closer to that in this pandemic,
Oh, yep,
right?
I think you're right.
And as we're moving closer to that, as we're solving problems around for food banks and shelter, and all those kinds of things, right? We did a $500,000 gift card campaign out here uh, because the need was so big, right? Um, and what we found was it actually brought some things together that normally wouldn't, right? Unfortunately, right? Many churches were disconnected from the schools in their neighborhoods, right?
Yep.
So link a church or a pastor at least with a principal, right?
Mm,
And let those two together figure out what's going on within their community and how you meet those needs. One of the things that came out of that is let's get people gift cards, right? And why gift
mhm.
cards? Because if the more we can get people out of lines, the safer they are.
That's right.
Right? If people can stand in line less time, right?
Mhm.
And this was before we knew mask would need it.
Yep.
So that whole thing began to come together to solve a food problem. I think we can get some creative solutions around food.
Mm, mm,
um, and how food gets to everyone. Where if another crisis comes, food won't be the issue.
mm.
How do we like? I think we can do that. I think there's enough resource within the system of food distribution where
Yep.
everybody can eat.
Well, it's not food is a commodity. It's not like food. Yeah, it's about getting it places. It's not,
Exactly.
it shouldn't be that hard, yet somehow there are some systemic problems, right?
Right. 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 And but because of the need right now, we're moving past some of those systemic problems
Yep.
and get to the bottom of what is driving us to go forget that right now, get these people some food.
Hmm.
Whatever's driving that thing is what we want to keep, right? um
Hmm.
and that's worth keeping, whether that's grace, whether that, I don't know, whatever that thing is that makes right now somebody go, you know what, get enough food to this place. Like I know there's a big company up in Washington part area I work in Seattle that's giving 1,000 meals a day to
Man.
this community that needs them, and it's not hurting their pockets, right?
Well done.
It's not hurting their pockets. It's a
Uh-huh.
blip on their screen. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in from San Francisco up to Seattle. That's just like mega tech like alley,
Oh yeah,
right?
that's right.
From Google to Microsoft to Nike to Intel, right?
Hmm.
Amazon, all of those things are within an 8 hours drive.
Hmm.
And so the company that's doing it, 1,000 meals a day is not, that's no, okay. If you can do that, let's take that, right? And let's reconfigure how we do food in that place. So I think that's one. I think that's a big one. If we can solve a food issue, I think it uh, makes us more creative in some harder areas.
Yeah.
Right. That's one place I think is within reach if we think it through.
Hmm.
Um, I think um, the idea of what a community can do when they know each other's story, right? There are people now who are once a week in their communities and their neighborhoods. Everybody's coming out into their driveway, right?
Yeah.
They're staying far apart, but then they're hearing one another's stories. Oh, I didn't even know this person. I've never seen this person before. Y'all live like 200 feet from each other, right? And so, what what can we do um, to fan the flame of understanding each other's narratives? Because I think
Yeah.
understanding each other's narratives makes us think differently about other people.
Hmm.
That's some foundational work that I think is getting done right now, actually.
I agree. I'd also say it's kind of the underground guerrilla warfare to get past all of our kind of divisive talk, public talk politically throughout the nation. Man, you can diffuse that stuff and just go right under it and start
Mhm,
developing
mhm,
relationships with people to short circuit that nonsense. I
mhm,
think.
mhm.
I think you can.
Yeah, I agree, right? Um, and here's my thing. Like we've been talking an hour and we have not talked politics, literally, right?
Yep.
And I don't think we need politics to solve these people problems.
Yeah.
I think there's enough resource without that. Now, is that important? Absolutely, because it affects a whole lot of stuff.
Yep.
But there is a piece of this where um, I think we count on people to influence systems as opposed to systems dictating how people should behave towards one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That
think.
changes,
Yeah.
that changes the game.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you think of like the big law changes in this country and big revolutions, they've generally come from the people, and they're generally in reaction to large groups of people pushing for years to enact social change, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Hmm.
And the more we get people understanding and realizing that, which I think there's a little swell happening around it, the
Yeah,
better off we'll be.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That sense of just being in physical proximity and getting to know each other's stories. Yeah, I think that's big, and I so I'm going to go back to what I said at the very beginning about this idea of kind of walking around my neighborhood and getting to know neighbors. And there was this immediate like, well, it was like that when I was a kid. But then I look back and say, well, yeah, but when I was a kid, DeKalb County schools were still segregated and they were starting to integrate. Like, I mean, they did the whole busing thing when I was started high school. Okay.
uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
And then I look at how my neighborhood is now, and it's dramatically more diverse now. Yet we don't have that sense of, and some of that is just the nature of our society. We're
Right.
stuck inside on screens. And I think, man, how cool could it be now if we all start getting out and having those connections in the neighborhood and hearing each other's stories of people that maybe we wouldn't have ordinarily hung out with?
Right, 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 right. Yeah. I mean, there's some implications, right? Of of where we're going, and there's a whole lot of political rhetoric around it that goes back and forth. But we are a much more diverse country than we were, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And all our numbers are showing that there's not going to be a majority. Like white isn't going to be a majority.
Yep.
And so,
No doubt.
And so some of the conversation is some of the angst of that is what we're seeing play out around us. And if we don't get a handle on that reality, then we're just going to destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Like this won't work. And so, or one group will dominate another, and I don't think that's what people want. Right.
No, I think we need to, that's this whole, I don't know how you do relationships writ large, but it's got to be a cultural movement that just kind of rejects this kind of, I would almost call it power politics. I mean, I'm always, when I hear some of the discussions, I'm like, so what is your solution for these people just to go away? Like, we're all here together, so we got to figure this out.
Right. We sure do, because it's really not like that. Trajectory can't be changed at this point. I mean, unless there's some massive craziness, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think that's also playing out in our time, right? Yeah, we still got a lot of problems, man. I mean, we Georgia just, Ahmad last week, right? Like, it didn't happen last week, but it seemed like it did, right? Because we just found out about it, and those kinds of things are where our injustice sits, and what we've got to deal with differently.
Yep, that's right. Well, and I think, it's been eye-opening to me over the years. So when I think about what happened in Brunswick, for some people, it's kind of a shocking, like, oh my, how did this happen? And I think for a lot of people, like, this has been happening a long time.
Right.
And I'll be honest, it was probably only within the past 10, 15 years that I started learning, and it was just being fortunate to be in proximity to Black friends who started telling me stories about, here's the kind of discussion I have to have with my kids when they get to a certain age. That, I mean, honestly, I didn't know anything about that. That's like, how would I have known that? And I was fortunate enough to be in places to learn that. It shouldn't take situations like this for people to start learning those things.
Right.
But the more people are exposed to what those and back to your talk about learning other people's narratives, it really matters.
Yeah, definitely. So the term "get back to normal" is one that frustrates me a little. Frustrates me a lot. And I don't think there's no normal to get back to. We're not going back to it. If we can get folks understanding, like, that norm is gone, and what does the new one look like, and what are the opportunities within the new normal?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Love that.
It's a new normal. It's a new way of living. It's a new way of relating. It's new heroes, honestly.
Yeah.
Right?
And let's hope maybe that there starts to be part of the new normal is a sense of hope in some places where there haven't been hope.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we are about out of time. One thing that I would like to be a new normal is at some point to get you to an Atlanta United game with me and go to a footy mob tailgate.
All right, all right. Well, I have a grandchild down there now, so that is a very high possibility
All
for
right. Well,
sure.
when
So,
when things get back to a new normal and we must start moving in a better direction, let's make that happen.
all right, and as long as I can,
You can.
all right. Is it friendly? Is it friendly enough?
Hey, you got to rep your city.
I,
I'll rep mine. I don't know if I have all my footing. Yeah, here we
oh,
go.
I know you got stuff.
That's
I knew I was opening a can of worms by doing that.
all right. Hey, appreciate you joining me, Leroy. We could probably do this for hours,
Right, exactly.
but we will talk again sometime soon. For all the guests, thank you for tuning in. Please